And we are back with another installment of the Artisans of the Horizon, a video conversation series that showcases different leaders throughout the country. And eventually, if this continues, we'll get people outside of the United States because we're not the center of the world as much as we might think we are. And today I have my good friend, the Reverend Chelsea MacMillan in New York. She is currently in New Jersey, but she's a New Yorker, so don't tell anybody. And Chelsea, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start talking?
Sure. Hi, Jerry. It's good to see your face. And funny that we just keep, well, I mean, you're in Texas anyway, so we already have only like a Zoom connection most of the time, but it is sad to not have you come to New York. So this is
Mhm.
all I get. Well, I'm Chelsea. Jerry told me to tell everyone how awesome I am. I don't really know how to do that, but I think I'm here because Jerry and I both have an interest in sacred activism. That's been my path and my ministry since, well, since my whole life, probably, as purpose just keeps unfolding. But since I was ordained as an interspiritual minister in 2015, so it's been a few years. Constantly looking at the relationship between spirituality and social justice and doing things like convening community around those topics. So a few years ago, I co founded a community called the Brooklyn Center for Sacred Activism. And that's been through its own ebbs and flows. And we're kind of in another little, I don't know, growth spurt of momentum now. I'm also a spiritual director, so I work with people one on one and in small groups around the big questions like what the hell am I doing with my life? How do I contribute to this world that's in so much pain? Um, and I also organize with Extinction Rebellion. That's another big part of my life. I organize with XR here in New York City and have been part of organizing the regenerative culture aspect, which is a huge part of our movement. And I always tell people that like really we're just talking about sacred activism here, but we don't use that term because spirituality is still kind of like, you know, a thing. So anyway, but regenerative culture is really about how are we taking care of ourselves and each other as a movement, and how does that translate to how we're taking care of each other on this big spinning blue planet. So, and I think that's where the real work is, the real revolution, and that can be really fierce and radical. And anyway, I'm like getting into all the topics now that we should be talking about, but those are the things that fill my life um, currently.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, wow, she's really getting into it. She's like just making a list of all the things that we're going to talk about. I love it. But you definitely said something that I think is really the key to this series and key to our work and the work that a lot of us who have been showcased on this series are doing. And that really is this is not just asking these big questions of, like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? How am I interplaying with this reality of this world that's profoundly beautiful and mystical and mysterious and exciting, but also deeply hurting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like not just the beings, the human beings on this planet, but the animals and the air and uh, the birds and everything, the plants. And how do we relate to that? And is it only the fact that, well, that's just how it is, and we're gonna go through it, and then we're gonna all die at some point, and then that's the end of the story. But is there more to that? And that's really, I think, what I'm calling the horizon. That which is right in front of us, I'm calling it the horizon, because what often happens is if you go onto the top of a mountain and you look over and you see the sunset or you see the sun coming up. Um, that's the horizon. That point from which the sun is either coming up or down, that's the horizon. But what's interesting is that science tells us that the eye can see very far, much farther than what we realize. But because our brain can't comprehend that the distance, we only see as far as the horizon. But there's actually more beyond the horizon.
Hmm.
And so I'm using this as like a metaphor or as a construct of saying, we who are doing these big questions, asking these big questions, doing these demonstrations, daring to live in community with other people who maybe might agree with us on everything or might disagree with us on a lot of things, who may look like us, who may not look like us, who make love like us, who don't make love like us, like all of that. Like all of us who are daring to do all that are daring to tap into that creative force, that artistic reality, that the universe, that the cosmos was born out of. So we're taking that energy and we're creating by being committed to this moment, being available to this experience, which is my definition of an artisan of the horizon, being available to this experience so that in our deep commitment to this moment, we can give birth and help recognize the emergent world that's happening beyond that horizon, the
Yeah.
world to come. Um, and I think that relates a lot to the work that you do, particularly with Extinction Rebellion, because that's the whole MO of Extinction Rebellion, whether they know it or not. Is they're like, no, we get to decide if we want to go extinct or not, and we don't want to. That's our purpose. And we need to start speaking up for those who don't have the ability to make that decision. So take that, and what does your heart have to say about that?
Well, first of all, I just really love all of that, and I love that you use the word artisan, because I think that there's something in the creative process where we really have to be in the unknown and respond to the thing we're working with. I think actually you using the word artisan reminded me of a metaphor that Matthew Fox uses in a book called A Spirituality Called Compassion, which to me is like a really great sacred activist, uh, you know, book.
Yeah.
And he talks about like the potter. The potter has this like relationship with the clay and is like constantly learning from and responding to that material that the potter is working with. And so, as a creative person and as an artistic person, like you can't really decide exactly how the creative process is going to go and what the end goal is. You have to be in the moment the whole time. And I think that's something that we lose sight of so often as activists. We get so caught up in this is the right way. This is the correct way. This is exactly what the future should look like, and that's where a lot of like our cancel culture comes from. That's where a lot of like, just in general, like our strife and our conflict is like, no, this is the right way, and no, this is the right way. And the fact of the matter is that none of us can see beyond what's happening right now. And so we have to keep coming back to this place of utter humility and surrender to the unknown. And that's a really, really terrifying place to be. I'm curious, like how you stay in that place and what your relationship is with that place, or
You know,
whatever, or if there's anything else that's coming up for you.
yeah, no, I think that's right on. I mean, I have been reflecting recently on some of what I call my core teachings, the teachings that I have developed over the years in my own personal spirituality as I've grown on my journey and as I keep going on my journey. And I was just thinking, what were the teachings that I either learned from other people or that I kind of manifested over time from my study and experience. And one of the ones that always came back to me in that reflection was this commitment to radical surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not as a radical, like, well, the word radical, I think people get so like upset about it, and it literally is like probably the best word ever. It means to go back to the root. It basically means like to get to the bottom line. So like, calm down, everybody. It's like, it's not a bad word. But like for me, my definition of radical surrender is a deep commitment to having opportunity.
Hmm.
uh, and empowering other people to have opportunity. So when you surrender to the unknown, when you surrender to God, when you surrender to spirit or to this experience, what is happening is you are choosing to say with your body and with your spirit that you're making space. You're choosing to make space so that um, something different can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's like, you know, when you go into your room and you see that you have all of this stuff on your floor, well, you can either just give up and let all that stuff just be there and then go and do something else, or you can radically surrender to the fact that for something to happen, you got to move all this stuff around, you know.
Mm.
And then you can get to the carpet, then you can get to, once you get there, then you can vacuum, you can, you have an opportunity to reorganize those books. You can sit down on the carpet, you can see the carpet, you know. So it's like so for me, radical
Clean your
surrender.
room, Jerry.
Huh?
Do you need to clean your room? Show
I
us the.
might. I might need to clean it a little bit. I'm trying to talk myself into doing it.
Yeah. You're like, I really am looking for the opportunity that's presenting itself.
Yes, exactly. So it's like oh gosh, it's a you know, so it's a commitment to reimagining. And so that's what I hear you saying, and I think that's a good place to really work there and to be there, and that is a creative space. And for me, part of how I do that is um, to always remind myself that I can have an opportunity to praise um,
Hmm.
if I so choose to do so.
Hmm.
Um, so like the other day, I was feeling really anxious about this project I'm working on. I'm editing a book. I'm helping edit a book, and I uh, probably out of my ego, I agreed to edit 3 chapters out of this book instead of probably I should only have agreed to do one. um, but so I was feeling anxious about it because
Oh
the
no, did you
deadline.
freeze?
Oh, can you hear me?
Jerry.
Can you hear me? Ooh. Are you there? I think I lost you.
You
Ah,
froze.
there we go. Okay, it's working now. That's okay. That's happened before. So what did you hear me say? What was the last thing you heard?
The last thing you said was you probably should have only agreed to edit one chapter.
Yes, okay. So I probably should have only agreed to edit
Hopefully, the
one
writer is
chapter.
not watching this episode.
I don't think so. But I do plan on doing all 3. I'm just like there's one particular day I was just feeling super anxious about it.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I don't like this feeling. I mean, I deal with anxiety a lot, but there's one particular moment I was like, you know, I just don't like this feeling. So I'm, you know, and I'm not going to be one of those people who I'm like, well, just be positive, have a positive mind, because I don't buy into that.
Hmm.
I think that's just silly and immature. But I do believe that praise is an opportunity to kind of push back against that energy of anxiety. So I decided to take those feelings that I was having and to take and try to put words to them, and then make a song out of it. And it doesn't have to be like a and just a melody that you make up or whatever. And then after doing that for a few minutes, uh, you could feel things like were shifting around and stuff like that. And that's a practice I have often, and I do that all the time. I mean, everywhere, even at demonstrations. It's so funny. Sometimes I get looks from people, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just singing. I'm singing my mood." Um, and
How
so,
did the song go?
huh?
Can you sing us some of the song?
Well, I ended up singing a praise and worship song, because that was the one that came out of, as when I started singing. That was the one that came out, and the words are, "God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed.
Mm,
Give me vision to see things like you do." So it's not a, it's a praise and worship song, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it's like, "God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do."
mm.
Um, I don't want to sing more of it because I don't want to get copyrighted.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I like that song, and I like that those words. I won't be overwhelmed. And anyway, long story short, it's fine. I'm almost finished with the first chapter.
Mhm. Well,
um,
cool. And I'm curious about that. I mean, because what I would sort of think about in that moment, and tell me if this is true for you or if there's something else going on, but it sounds to me like there's um like gratitude, and I'm with you on the like, false positivity, or like, or just emphasizing positivity for the sake of like trying to feel good is it's sometimes it's hard to even explain, but it just kind of feels icky to me. And that's kind of what I was getting from you. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's spiritual materialism, is like, oh, we just do spiritual practice, or we just do these things to make
mm-hmm.
ourselves feel good. But
Bypass.
there's something really beautiful about gratitude and praise, which like really brings you into the moment of like what's true right now. Like you can't be thankful for something that isn't true or isn't happening yet. And so being thankful or giving praise brings you into the moment. And anxiety is thinking about the future. It's like fear of something that hasn't happened yet, and it's taking you out of that. It's taking you out of the moment and out of that place of opportunity that you were talking about. And also, I wanted to say the singing is kind of the same thing. Like singing is connecting you to your breath and keeping you in the moment, and like engaging the whole body. And I think that's another helpful thing that keeps you in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the right word, is gratitude. And science actually tells us that when you sing for at least 10 minutes, you release endorphins, your blood pressure goes down,
Mm,
you can think more clearly. Um, and yeah, and you do have to, praise connects us to what is real, what is
mhm,
tangible. Um, I remember when I was a part of the charismatic renewal, we were told in the healing ministry, for the prayer teams that prayed for healing for people and laid hands on people, we were always told to ask what explicitly that the person wanted us to pray for. Because we could pray in general, for people, but if there was something specific that they wanted healing from, they needed to tell us, because we cannot heal people if we don't know what we are praying for
mm,
healing for.
mm.
We need to know exactly, is it your shoulder? Then tell us it's your shoulder, so that we can pray that, for that we can send the energy there. And I think that's true with praise, is that praise reminds us of what is right in front of us, what is tangible. So
Yeah.
sometimes I just say, I give praise for the fact that I'm standing,
Mm,
uh,
mhm.
or the fact that I have the ability to acknowledge that I need to pray. you know
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
so
I think
yeah.
there's something simple and mundane there too. Like possibly mundane. And I don't mean mundane in a bad way. I just mean it's like small and sort of like an everyday thing, you know? Um, but what's interesting about what you just said about praying for something specific, I think is also, it's sort of the flip side of this, which um, is getting really clear about what's actually happening and coming to terms with and facing the reality of our situation. Like, to me, that's the first step in really facing everything that's going on in the world, because um, oftentimes sort of jumping to what we think is the solution is a way of keeping us from grappling with the reality of our situation. We actually talk about this a lot in Extinction Rebellion, and some people have even named Extinction Rebellion as a grief tending movement, because there's such a strong movement within the movement to feel our grief about the climate and to really recognize the gravity of the situation, and not just that it's like this seemingly looming crisis of possible extinction, but that also people are already dying, and so many of us, I mean, and everyone around the world is already affected by the climate crisis, but there are people around the world who are experiencing it at much greater harmful and destructive levels than other people in the world. And those people tend to be, in the global south, they tend to be people of color. They tend to be far less responsible for the crisis than the people who are, still, those of us in the north and the Western hemisphere especially are like experiencing a little bit less in term. I mean, it's not the destruction Olympics here, but like there are many of us who are sort of insulated from like really really extreme effects from the climate crisis thus far, and we're the ones who are the most responsible for it. I mean, I know I'm talking to you from Houston, and last year you had Hurricane. Which one was it? It was not. Was it Maria?
Harvey.
Or do you remember which one where you just like kept having flooding and
Hurricane Harvey.
Harvey? That's right.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, just like we're all experiencing different, um, you know, like greater storms and the warming and everything. But anyway, the point of all of that was to like get really really clear and really to really face the reality of the situation, because until we do that we can't heal it. Just like when you were praying for the shoulder as opposed to just like overall well-being, there's something really important about naming the pain and naming the hurt.
Yeah, because if you just pray for well-being, which you can do, and that's totally fine, it it doesn't acknowledge the reality of where the pain is actually coming from. Um,
Mm.
and it's important it's important to name. Name is important. I mean, if names weren't valuable, it would not it would not be a common theme in the Bible and in other sacred traditions, of something great happens and then people change their names. Um, and names didn't matter. People wouldn't graffiti them on walls,
Mm.
or tattoo the names of their family on their body.
Yeah.
So names are important. They're sacred. But something that you said in the beginning, I want to kind of swing back to, and that's this word of purpose.
Mm.
Um, I think it's an interesting word, because I think in our spiritual capitalist world, because there's a lot of spiritual capitalists, um, and the spiritual bypass people who want to use spirituality as a way of like of taking all that justice stuff that we need to do and throwing it out the window and being like, we can get all of that by just sitting on our cushions.
Right.
Uh, that's not our purpose, and we know that. I mean, we can look at all the great prophets and mystics of the histories, and know that they knew, whether they said it or not, that that wasn't the case, that our purpose is deeply embedded with the reality that we have to name what is happening, we have to touch it, we have to experience it, and in so doing, it can be transformed. So can
Mm.
you talk a little bit about how you feel like the way your life has been manifesting is really helping to bring alive your purpose and your play with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that purpose feels like this total mystery, and I mean, it's this paradox and this like total conundrum like kind of thing. And yet I experience, I mean, personally, like I feel like I'm living into my purpose every day, and it's something that I can feel, and it's like, and I can intuit it, and I know when I'm not in my purpose, but I can't always name when I am in my purpose. So it's kind of this thing of like, I mean, what I think purpose is a lot of wrestling. And I think it's a lot of wrestling with spirit and this sort of like unknowable force that's constantly propelling us forward. I mean, so I often feel that sometimes I feel like, whoa, I got to slow down, or like, please slow down, because I feel like I'm just being like kind of like constantly pushed along into purpose. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not worthy of this. Sometimes I think that people think that when they find their purpose, things are going to be all just going to be gravy afterward. And like, oh, I finally found the answer. And now I know what I'm doing. And I kind of feel like, I wouldn't say it's worse having found my purpose. And it's weird to even say like I found my purpose, but I do feel that since I felt called into ministry and into sacred activism, that I can more easily say I've been living into my purpose, and that I found the purpose that I feel like I'd been sort of searching for. Although I wouldn't say that I hadn't been living into my purpose before that, if that makes sense. It's like, looking back, it's like there are all these clues that have, yeah, that were living through me. I mean, so to put this, into like a concrete example, like I feel that a lot of my purpose is to communicate and like connect people to ideas, and also to inspire people into action. And I think I've been doing that my whole life. I was a sophomore in high school, and the US had just invaded Iraq, and I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I'd never like even joined a protest before. I lived in a super conservative city full of military. Like, it was surrounded by military bases. There's just like a very large military population there. Strong evangelical Christian conservative population, and I organized, like, I think 4 of us walked out of school to go protest the invasion of Iraq. and I think we skipped 1 class period to do this. Like, it was not like a glory moment in like, we didn't shut down any traffic or anything, but we like did it, and we went outside, and we like said our piece,
Mm-hmm.
And then after I left high school, I toured the world teaching music and dance to kids all over the world with a nonprofit performing arts group. And those things have now shown up in my activism. Like, I joined Extinction Rebellion, and I had done more direct action throughout my adult life, but I had never led actions. I'd never designed actions or anything. But because I had this like theater background, I could like sort of come up with like the arc of the thing that we're doing in the streets. And because I had like moved hundreds of kids from like one end of the school to another in like 2 seconds, not speaking the same language, like somehow, that appeared again when I was like leading a march and marshaling and leading the marshals, and you know what I mean? So like all these things have like come up in surprising ways. Like, I feel like I'm really living my purpose now. Like, oh, my life didn't actually turn out to be moving me toward a performance career, but certainly all of those things that I had learned and been sort of like born into um, like are appearing now in my life. So anyway, I there's a lot there, and I think that uh, sorry, I'm like kind of going off on all these tangents, and I just like love talking about purpose because it's like so intangible sometimes, and it's like, and it's slippery, and like, and I feel like more and more in my life I am just trying to listen and see how it's appearing now, and just to like live into the mystery of it, because it's totally a mystery. And it's, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm like all excited about purpose now, but again, it's not like, I've definitely struggled with purpose and wrestle with it constantly. Like, am I really made for this? Am I worthy of this? Am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? Am I, you know, can I get a little support here? I'm like sometimes I'm just like yelling at God, and I'm like, come on, like, like I think I'm doing what you want me to do. Like, could I get a little, and I'm still living in this like capitalist society. Like, can I get a,
Mhm.
little leg up on rent here? I don't have to be like bartending for the rest of my life. So anyway,
No,
thanks for listening to all that. But
I love that, and I have so many echoes in my life too, and I, but the tangible thing that about purpose that that you said was that was the unfolding, the the unfolding, the wrestling, because I think that is what people don't realize about purpose. Um, Saint Catherine of Siena said, "If you are who you should be, you will set the world ablaze."
I love that quote.
But she says should be, and that's
Mm,
because it's like I believe that God, spirit, whatever you want to, whatever word you want to attach to that being, um, has a dream for all of us. Um, but capitalism and the society that we live in actively tell us and sell us another dream,
mm,
and it's our job to take that dream and throw it out the window because it's not real. It's a false
yeah.
construct, um, you know. And we have to claim that dream and that vision that God had for us before we were born. Um, the scripture says that before we were even born, that God knit us together and knew us in our mother's womb,
Mm,
knew who we are. And so I think what's often happening is that wrestling is that fact that God is trying to tell us, no, this is who you are. You are my beloved, and you need to go into the world and let everyone else know that they are beloved and that they are part of
mm,
this fabulous tapestry of cosmic awesomeness. Um, and you're not a machine that's meant to just
mm.
go to school, get a job, get married, have kids, and then die. Like
Right.
that's not your
Unless that's
purpose.
your purpose. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, but I think people don't realize that they have to go through that struggle, and that, but when they
Mm,
look back at it, this is where grace really becomes more evident. When they look back at their life, they start to see those places and those events and those moments where they're like, oh, that's why that happened. That's why
yeah.
I met that person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I often think that's where, I mean, coming back to the mystery, I often think that's where intuition is really speaking to us, or God, or I mean, I think we could, have another long discussion about what your inner knowing is versus spirit or God, or if it's the same thing or whatever. Um, but I think that when, at least in my life, it's the times where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, but it's happening. Like actually when I went into seminary, that's how it was. Like someone had I'd overheard people talk one spirit interfaith seminary in New York City, and that entire phrase didn't really mean anything to me. Like I was like, interfaith seminary. Like, I don't even know what that is. And I looked it up that night and I was like, oh, I have to do this. And I had no idea why. I was laughing the entire time. They had already started their school year, and I called them and I was like, I know you just started your classes, but I have to take your program. So tell me how I can make this happen. And I was just like laughing the whole time. I think it's like when those, in those moments where you're just like, I don't even really know why this is happening. That's often spirit speaking to us. Or like, oh, that's why I met this person. Or,
Yeah.
and then like those threads kind of weave themselves together later on.
Well, that's how our friendship started.
Yeah. I know. You just were like, you appeared in my house one day.
Yes, I did. I just showed up. I'm here. And you're like, here's the tea. Here's the restroom. Bye. And you just left me, a stranger, in your home. And I was the only one in the house.
You're going to make me sound like the worst host ever.
No, it was so cool because the energy of it was like, I mean, all you knew was that I was coming, that I was a friend of one of our mutual friends, and that I was an activist, and that was it. That was all you knew. And you were so inviting, and you were so like just cool and like non-assuming or non-judging or anything like that. It was a perfect example of non-judgment and solidarity. And it was just awesome. I mean, I remember when you left and I was sitting there, like 10 minutes after you left, it suddenly dawned on me. It's like she left me in her whole house by myself and she barely even knows me. I was like, that is really awesome.
I mean, it's trust. Like, I mean, and not like, I mean, thank you for saying that for sure. But I think that this is something that I've worked a lot on practicing, and I've been taught it by other people, is like really trusting each other. And it reminds me of when I went to Standing Rock, and I can't remember if we met before or after I went to Standing Rock, but when we showed up to Standing Rock, we were greeted very warmly. And even though, it was like tons of young activists, many of us were in our circle were white, and many of the like thousands of people that were showing up every day were also like young white activists, and plenty of Black, Indigenous, POC, and queer and trans folk, and it was like this really amazing community that popped up. But we were welcomed immediately and trusted. They were like, I just remembered, I forget what they said exactly. They were just telling us about the camp, and they were like, this is a prayer camp. We have these values and these guidelines. And the sense that I got was that they totally trusted us, and that we were being held to that level of trust, as opposed to what I grew up with and what I think normally happens in like white Christian spaces is you have to earn my trust. So you're like constantly watched until you do something good enough, then it's like, oh, now I trust you, as opposed to the other way around, which is really holding people accountable and inviting them into radical trust. And I think that's something that we have to practice on small scale, on a small scale in our interpersonal relationships and in our communities. And this brings me back to Extinction Rebellion, which is because sometimes people, and in all activist movements for sure, so I'm not just calling out my fellow rebels, but like and I'm guilty of this too, where it's like we gotta get the shit done and just like move into action and change the world, just like blow everything, not blow everything up, blow up the systems, non-violently, and then we'll just like instantly have the beloved community that we're all desiring. And it's like, no, we have to work at that. And if we don't have bonds of trust that we've built, and which really only come, it's not just like, oh, you think like I do, so I trust you. It's that we've like worked through our shit. We've worked through conflict. We work at it every day because that's what's going to take us through the next time they're, in New York City, the next time we have like a Hurricane Sandy, or like there's a major food shortage somewhere else in the world, and then we suddenly don't have, New York City is so dependent on all of these systems. So it's just like, what, when shit hits the fan, because it will, how do we get through? How do we make sure people are eating? How do we trust our neighbors aren't going to like come in and take our stuff, or or come take my cans of food? It's like, because we've actually first built the relationships, and we're going to share our food, and like figure it out together. Anyway, so I think trust is like a huge thing that we need to be working on in our communities.
And when you're able to flow, I like what Carlton Pearson says. We talk about going with the flow, and he likes to say we need to go with the flow, but we also need to learn to grow with the flow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think when we grow with that flow of our purpose, that trust manifests.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was in your house, I felt a great sense of gratitude, because I did feel like I was given the gift of not only being able to stay there, but also being given the gift of that I was trusted, and it was a radical example of these values that are the values that are emerging, and that will be the foundational values of the world that is being birthed into reality.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so much of it is a remembering, I think there have been
absolutely.
cultures, and but it's both. Like, I don't think it's just a return to the past. Um, it's also a return to the new, so, or moving into the new. I don't, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah. No, but that's a good word, remembering. Yeah, I mean, to bring back to mind, which is that word literally translates to.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's good. I mean, I oftentimes, every time I think of that word, I always think of the Christian ritual of communion. Jesus said, "Do
Mhm.
this in remembrance of me. Do this to bring me back to mind." Which
Mhm.
the word mind is the same word in Greek that we get psychology from, but it's also the same word that's used in Greek to represent the soul, the innermost part of your
Oh,
person. So
yeah.
Jesus is literally saying, "Bring me back to your inner self.
Wow.
Let me inhabit you." And that was why he left us bread. He was like, "Here, you're gonna put this in your body to nourish your body. Well, put me into your body. Let me nourish your body too." So yeah, so I often wonder about that in activism. How can we bring people back to our innermost self, and in so doing, we heal each other in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the regeneration. That's the regeneration thing you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, yeah, how do you think that can happen, or have you seen it happen in other places?
Uh, I think it happens when we allow ourselves to not um, be overly committed to the narratives that we've established for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We get so
Mm-hmm.
used to being, and I think this goes to your comment about cancel culture. We get so used to being in this stream of consciousness, um, or in this idea, or in this brand. Um, and I think it's okay, but I think what happens is when we get so committed to that narrative that we constructed for ourselves, we ultimately deny or erase the need for that radical surrender. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think the universe is so good at just randomly deciding to have a plot twist. Um,
Hello, 2020 is like the perfect example of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think really the best spiritual practice is to learn how to be an impromptu actor. You know?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I
Go on,
once
talk more about that.
sorry. Well, and we could also talk forever, so shut me up whenever you want to. But actually, it was just reminding me of I once did a workshop for Buddhist Dharma teachers. Like they were like meditation teachers of like this particular Tibetan lineage, and they have like this annual teachers retreat. And so I came and just did improv acting with them, and because it's all about spontaneity and truly being in the moment. And it was just so amazing to watch these Buddhist teachers who are used to being in the moment in a very like quiet, still kind of way to now have to like play and like be surprised by each other. And I mean it was both like really fun for most people, and it was hard. It's like totally it's a struggle to say yes and be vulnerable and totally be in the moment. So I mean it's interesting too
Yeah,
because the word apocalypse gets thrown around a lot, and and it's very interesting that we tend to think of the apocalypse as like this one big destructive event that's sort of like explosive and just like buildings crumble and there's fire and fighting and like lots of drama and action. And instead this apocalypse has been most of us sitting at homes, and the enemy is like this tiny little virus that we can't even see with the naked eye, and like we have to stay home and like be with ourselves and be with each other and like it's quiet. It quieted the whole world. And it's just interesting, like even what does it mean to even let ourselves be surprised by apocalypse, by things that are unveiling and changing and shifting dramatically.
yeah. I think that's quite right and quite right on. I mean, that yeah, we're being forced to learn how to love ourselves
Yeah.
because we've never been allowed to do that before. Um, I think it
Yeah.
finally got to the point to where Spirit was like, okay, I have sent you prophets, I have sent you mystics, I have sent you angels, and you still do not get that you need to learn to love yourself. So I'm gonna just stop everything.
Yeah. I hope people have been, I mean, that's tough, right? I mean, we all struggle with self-love, and I would say that activists more than other people that I'm in contact with are the guilty, maybe except for maybe like moms, like the guiltiest of like not taking care of themselves. And I mean self-care also is like really we should be talking about communal care and systemic care. And I think that there is something deeply psychological going on where we're like, I'm not allowed to think or love myself. I like, oh God, because I struggle with this myself. Like I'm so resistant to the idea, especially because I've been in so many like spiritual, more like new agey spaces where it's like it's all about self-love. And I'm like, no, we've got to change the system. Like, get off your mat, like stop being all in your feelings or whatever. But I can't tell you how many times I've gotten this lesson of like, you have to come back and like take care of yourself and love yourself. And the thing that really drove this home for me lately was with Extinction Rebellion. We had this evening of writing letters to Mother Earth, and and then we read them out loud, and it was so beautiful, and there was like so much praise and gratitude for the earth and like and her abundance. And but all of these letters were apology letters, and they were like letters of atonement, and which I think is really 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 important And when it's laden with just like shame and guilt and this idea that if humans were gone then the earth would just be fine, that like humans are just like a scourge upon the earth and we're just like a cancer, and if you just like got rid of us then the earth would be totally fine, is a denial of, first of all, ourselves as part of the earth. And it's also a denial of being actually able to deeply love the earth. Like, I've noticed in my own relationships that I can't truly love another person if I don't think I'm worthy of love. And I can't be loved unless I think I'm worthy of love. Because, like, I mean, think about it. Like, if I loved you, my friend, but like my love was just laden with like my insecurities and doubt, and which are totally normal human things, but like if I'm constantly just trying to like fill a hole with my love for you and like trying to get validation, it just like there's like an ickiness there that like that keeps us from loving and accepting each other as we are, you know. And I think it's the same on this collective level and like loving the earth, that if we weren't so laden with guilt and shame, then we could truly radically love the earth. And it's also the same in like racial justice. Like as a white person, if I just like interact, every interaction I have with a person of color is like full of my shame and guilt, then I can't actually love that person in front of me and do anything for their liberation.
Yeah.
So fair. It's so easy. As you said, before we started this call, Jerry was like, we're just going to figure out the world in the next like hour and
Yeah.
it'll be so easy, right?
It's gonna be so easy. I mean, we just gotta do this one episode, and everything will be fixed magically, and all the world will listen to us. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, if we're operating from that space of inadequacy or that space of not enough, um, it's not only is it just not healthy. I mean, it manifests bad things in our body. You know, uh,
Yeah.
it's so I mean that itself is enough of a reason to not do that. But it also, I think, energetically, I think it it blasphemes those who have gone before us, all the work that they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, you know, Holly Near has a song called uh, oh God, what is the name of it? I can't remember the name of it. But there's a verse in the song that says, it'll come back to me. But anyway, there's in the song there's a line that says um, something about to that effect of the ancestors, those who have gone before us, you know, have done this great work,
Mm-hmm.
and for me to be in despair is to deny that work.
Mm,
Um, and I oftentimes, and when because I mean, those feelings are natural. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't manifest, you know. So we can't neglect them or deny them. We need to recognize them and own them, but we don't have to operate in them, and we can choose to put them
yeah.
into their proper place. But I think I mean, one of my practices when I get into that space is to remember that I'm not an isolated experience in the world, that I'm actually a byproduct of a bunch of other people, um, you know, and like a bunch of other cosmic things. Like I am the air, you know, I am the
Yeah.
plants and the trees. I'm also my mother and my father, and their mother and father,
Yeah.
um, you know, and I'm also all of their teachers, um,
Mhm.
and all of their ministers and all of their friends and all of their ministers and parents and friends. Like I'm all of the people all in one. Um, and because of that, I have power. Um,
Mm,
and not to mention, I mean, me as a theist and as a Christian, I am a big believer that I am a child of God, and therefore I have no inherent nobility. Um,
mm,
and that is a beautiful energy, and when we choose to cultivate that, um, that is the real energy that projects you into the streets and gives you the ability to stand in front of riot police with all
Yeah.
their guns faced at you and not dare to move.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. That can't come from an ego place. If you're ready to risk everything, you're coming from that fire, from that deep knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful.
I mean, and that's one of
That
the, I
chill.
mean,
I mean, it's powerful, and I can feel the challenge in that a little bit. Like,
well, yeah,
you know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
it, it is a challenge. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a challenge to, I think, clear away anything that isn't that. Like to clear away the like stories of inadequacy that we hear from others and we internalize and um, we live out of, you know.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a big believer in the act of blessing. Um, uh,
Mm,
I'm a big believer in blessing other people. I mean, like praying for people is good, but blessing is a form of prayer that I think is so good because benediction literally means to say good things.
mm,
So you know, people when they ask for a blessing, they think like you're gonna say in the name of the God who is all knowing and everything, and like all these really fancy religious words or whatever. And that's fine if that's how you are, but really that's not what a blessing is. A blessing is very natural. And actually we do it more than we realize. Every time you're with
mm.
somebody and you're like, oh, that is a gorgeous dress, that's a blessing. Or
I was just
you're
gonna say you're one of the most like complimentary people that I know. And like you're already good at this. Like you're just like constantly blessing people around you. So good
yeah,
job.
because well, thank you. I really do try.
Thank you.
Because it's an important practice. And I think, for me, at least personally, part of the reason why I consciously try to do it um, is because I grew up in the hospital. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up having specialists who were doing their job when they said, this is how you look and it's not normal. So we're going to have this operation so that we can correct it so that you can be a little bit more normal looking. There's, uh, they were doing their job and they said that, and that was what they were trained to do. And that was how they're trained to see you. And so I don't fault them for that. But at the same time, growing up hearing that all the time and having people poke you and prod you and touch your face and say these things about you and project all of this onto you, um, it does something to you. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think for me, how I look now is very different than how I used to look. Um, and I'm very grateful for it. But because of that, because I had so many of those negative messages implanted upon me, not just by them, but by other people as well. Uh, when I look in the mirror, I still have to challenge myself to to say something good about myself and to see myself as good.
Yeah.
Um, because I have developed this psychosis, I guess. I don't know, but like always feeling like even though I know in my head um, that I look good, and by all accounts from like a material perspective that I look good, um, when I see myself, I immediately instinctively start thinking, well, I could have that redone. That's not really that great. Why does
Mm,
my hair look like that? And it's always like this feeling of you're just never really quite there. Like,
yeah.
you know. And so, I think how you flip that over is by doing that blessing. So, I don't want people to have to deal with that because people already have to deal with so much. And that's why I'm such a big believer in complimenting and blessing. And it absolutely drives me crazy when people don't know how to take a compliment. I'm like, really? Like, are you serious? Like, I just spent like several ounces of my breath to tell you something nice. Damn it, say thank you.
Well, I feel like we could talk forever, but I was thinking, do you want to how would you feel about sending us off with a blessing? Maybe do a little benediction to just close this out?
I will, but I had one more thing I wanted to talk with about. Um,
Okay.
and I want you to tell us a bit more about your center, the Brooklyn Center for Sacred Activism.
What would you like to know? I feel like we've been in sort of an interesting place lately because we haven't been able to gather, and it's been sort of
Yeah.
there's been some dormancy, in the past few months because of the pandemic and because of some other dynamics, and um, but I am feeling more energized toward it now, and feeling like there's um, more energy here for really reimagining what community looks like,
Hmm.
and how can people come together around these wanderings about inner transformation and social transformation. And I think for me, the next challenge is to really, um, well, yeah. So I don't know if that gives a sense of what BCSA is. It's been a community, an interfaith community of people who are living a life dedicated to personal and social transformation, and discovering rituals that hold us together. So for a long time, we've been doing Sunday gatherings, and the current manifestation. Well, I shouldn't say current because everything's like pre-COVID. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But like, what is time anyway? So like the most current manifestation of that is to have a Sunday night gathering where we do a potluck, and then we have a liturgy. We have a sacred activist liturgy, and we sing together. We have silence together. We pray together. Um, things that, because we're mostly a group. I think mostly it's been people who are, for lack of a better term, spiritual but not religious. Um, the all of those are sort of sticky things, to be in silence together and to sing together and to pray together. Like we, you know, I have trouble using the word God still, like lots of people, we all have like our sticky pieces. So how do we have ritual that holds us together, that isn't necessarily dogmatic, So I think that's been one of our big explorations, and I think some of the places that I'd like to see us go are are to really be really connected to our community even more, be like more place based. I mean, we are place based, but like to really be connecting to the neighborhood, and issues of justice around the neighborhood. And uh, so there have been like little spurts here and there, but I think that like we're being appear and manifest itself in the next year.
Can you hear me? Are you there?
I can now. I think there's a little bit of a delay.
Oh no. Did we freeze? You can hear me?
Uh-huh. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, I hear you. I think my internet's be wonky. But what I wanted to say about what you said is that I think y'all are living into the reality of who needs to be human together.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a beautiful manifestation of the world to come, and that you're holding a light for people. You're holding a light for people to draw near so that they know where to go. And that's the blessing I want to leave with people. So I have a blessing here.
Okay.
Um, so it's called a benediction for the light bearers.
Mm.
And this is it. Bless you who shine your light, even when you would rather extinguish it. Thank you for your steadfastness. Bless you who shine your light even when it is little and you are embarrassed by it. Thank you for your vulnerability. Bless you who shine your light even though you think it is pointless and stupid. Thank you for your discipline. Bless you who shine your light not because you want to be seen, but because you want others to be seen. Thank you for your generosity. Bless you who shine your light not because you do, but because you want to. Thank you for your big heart. Bless you who shine your light even when ridiculed, abused, angry, and neglected. Thank you for your courage. Bless you who shine your light when it is not sanctioned, validated, ordained, or affirmed. Thank you for your defiance. And bless you, light bearer. You teach me, Chelsea, what it means to warm someone up with the mystique of your glow. Your disciplined, steadfast, and courageous presence teaches me to lean into the reality that there are truly people who will light the way. Bless you. Your generosity and big heart are like sparks that kindle the flame of my life and help me and help others set their fires for living. And may your defiance, which disrupts the darkness, be the energy that encourages us to extend our lights towards the path so others may continue their journey. It is so, and it always will be so.
Mm. Amen. That's
Amen.
perfect.
Well, I'll send it to you. You can use it for your
Thank
liturgy.
you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of it, just being fabulous as always. And I love your red nails. That's so fabulous. I love it.
I also put on lipstick because I never have a chance to put on lipstick anymore.
I love it.
Ministers have vanity too, so
Yes, it's true. It's true.
it'll
Well,
be fun.
I will definitely put all the links to everything that you're doing and all the stuff that you are so people can connect and see you and everything. If people want to do spiritual direction, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Email revchelseamac, which is revchelseamac @gmail.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, people definitely should reach out, and especially they have those wrestlings that they have been doing with spirit, and from this point on, I will see you and everybody else next time for our next episode. Have a great day, everybody. Bye bye.